using for your 2D work?
Well, for a short answer, it's mixed media, but I used Indian ink, acrylic, watercolor, pencil, chalk, and marker. So whatever I can find to make a mark, I put it on there. So this is a new body of work. I usually cover paper with color and stuff, but these I sort of left with a lot of white space, and so then they become more like sculptures. So maybe I will make these 3D when the time comes.
And I do see like a repetition in both the palette and also lines in your 2D work and your 3D work.
Yeah, so it's easier with the paper to put a cartoon line around it, but with my my other work, I sort of have to draw in, you know, the shadows and stuff. You know, so this figure I painted in the shadows. There's a dog woman over there that the shadows are painted in. So there is a combination, and I just have to figure out how to mesh them a little bit more. You know, because all the glazes are handmade. I feel like an alchemist, and a little scoop of this, a little scoop of that, and so my palette, you know, is changing a little bit, but I sort of like the idea of getting stuff right out of the tube. It's so much easier.
Now, Mark, the texture on your sculptures, does that come from your glaze or the way that you're working the clay?
Most of it comes from the glaze.
Okay.
But I do, when I build these things, I build maybe 6 to 8 inches a day. And then I beat it with a stick to strengthen it. And so each day I keep going higher and higher. And then I misfire it. And then I put a glaze on it when it comes out of the kiln. So I fire these twice.
Gotcha. Mark, we have somebody who wanted to ask a question.
Oh, good.
Eleanor Herman. Eleanor, if you can hear us, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hello.
Is she there? Eleanor, are you there? Can you hear us? I'm gonna guess maybe not.
Well, actually, so we do have another question while Eleanor is preparing. And this person wanted to know why your figurative work appears to be primarily women.
Well, to be honest with you, I like women better than men. I find the female form more sensuous for me. I've done men in the past, but as soon as you put a nude male out there, then sparks start to fly. You know, they start comparing penis sizes and stuff like that. So it's just so much easier working with the female form. It has a time-honored presence, you know, throughout history. The female has always been put on a pedestal, and you know, I'm not ashamed. I enjoy the way the female form is.
Okay.
Well, so this is all fit in my van. So think about that. This is one trip.
I had a question, Mark. So when we were installing, you talked about how some people who purchase your work, either collectors or individuals, will put your work in gardens or in outdoor spaces. And I was wondering if when you are making your sculpture, do you think about it being in an outdoor setting, or does that thought ever come into mind about like the final setting that these pieces might reside in?
So a lot of times I don't think where they're going. I just have to get it out of my system. Like these ant pieces, I have no idea where they're going. They'll probably be in my studio. But my Buddha shapes, my meditation pieces, I think would be great garden pieces. And I try to meditate, and I'm not good at having this no mind thing. So this one over here is just thinking about meditating. And the one over on the other side is you have all this, what they call monkey mind, all these people's voices on top of the head.
We're gonna try and navigate to see the other one you're talking about.
Yeah, so I try to, work on meditation. I find that the trance dance meditation is better when I'm moving. I also do Tai Chi, and that's a form of moving meditation. But back to your question, I like some of the pieces outside, but I also like having figures that you live with inside.
Mhm. So the meditative figures in particular, they almost have, kind of remind me of maybe like an Eastern iconography. Is there a religious, iconography that inspires you?
Well, I love Zen Buddhism, and the eyes on the figures are open, and that was inspired by Haniwa figures, which are Japanese burial ground figures.
Wow.
So they feel that when someone dies, the soul would go into the sculpture. So I always like the idea of having a place for souls to live. So yeah, there is an Eastern feel to it. I like their philosophy, but I'm also a product of Western philosophy. And it's interesting how Western philosophy sort of influences the world. I was in India talking with a bunch of artists, and we were quizzing each other on Western art history, and they were sort of knocking my socks off on some of this stuff, and I couldn't keep up with their Eastern artists either. So people know what's going on.
It's interesting when you talked about the eyes, because for folks who haven't seen this work yet, especially some of your animal figures, their eyes are so empathetic. Like I see so much humanity in them, and the large dog's about 6 feet tall. So you're really coming eye to eye with it. And our sheep figures are smaller, but there seems to be sort of such personality, but really through the eyes, which I think is really beautiful. It's made me feel quite drawn to them.
The windows to the soul.
Absolutely.
You're speaking to this.
So I had a studio dog, and that's what my dogs are based off of, but he passed away. Now I have an honorary cat. And so there are impressions of dogs and cats, and impressions of sheep. I have life-size sheep, but I put them outside for the winter, and I couldn't get them unthawed for the show. So.
We have a question.
He was speaking to the thought bubbles earlier, and I think she'd like to know more.
Okay, we have a guest who wanted to know about what is balancing on the heads of these figures.
Well, that's a good question. So I have this ethereal form. Remember, this is clay, so I'm balancing these heavy things in small points. And just to get it into the kiln without cracking it, I took a little figuring out. So again, they're like thought balloons. So like this one, there's a head, but this object up here, in Scotland, they have the object that looks just like that, but a little bit smaller. And they don't know what they are. They dug them all up, and they're in all the museums. There's lots of speculation that, maybe it was used for target practice, maybe it was, some religious significance, but I just sort of like that shape of mystery. So again, the figure is a thought, and the mystery involved. And the same with this one is called Looking Back, and I want to be looking back at 2020 and saying we're done with that, and moving on. But yeah, so I think of the figures and the stuff on top of the heads as what the sculpture is thinking.
And we had somebody who wanted to know if you can talk about the chemicals that you use to make the surface texture.
Okay, so on this bubble, I use silicon carbide, and 30% in any glaze will give you bubbles. So I just gave everybody secret formula. So what happens is it causes a carbon trap, and it bubbles in the kiln when the glaze melts. And so what these are cool bubbles that we, and I'm trying for that dug up look, you know. So I want the pieces to look old but yet new. You know, it's sort of that balance. You know, she's been around the block, but yet she's fresh. You know, so.
There's like an artifact quality.
Yes, an artifact. Yeah, so you know, there are parts and stuff. And when I fire these things, I fire them all so they're touching each other, something that they told you not to do in school. And then they support each other because I melt them so they can go outside. So they're leaning and having a good time. And then when I open the kiln door, I find out I have to take a crowbar, get them apart, you know, see what they're lays up to.
We had somebody wanted to ask if you could elaborate on the masks.
Okay, so as I said on the bullets, we have a problem with gun control. And we have this sort of like gun brain or bullet brain going on. So that's what the bullet shells are about. This one, sort of like that virus thing going on here. So again, a couple, but this one I thought was fun. You know, I wish I had hair that could do that. You know, some people are just, they got that fence up and they're just sort of prickly. That's the way to do. Here's that Scottish artifact again. And Mr. Blue Man. And, you know, I just have fun just to see what's there. You know, no intentions.
One of our guests wanted to know how your glazes handle the outdoors. Like, how do they weather?
Well, they weather really fine. The bubbles might soften over time, and sometimes the sculptures get a little mossy, but the color never changes. So I found that muriatic acid on the outside will take care of the green growth if you didn't like it, but I sort of like that nature sort of gets in and becomes part of the piece.
I would think so too. I think it would be really interesting. It would almost become a time-based piece to watch how it would change being outdoors.
Okay.
Oh, we have a
Kathy has her hand raised.
Kathy. I'm gonna, if you would like to unmute and ask your question, we'd love to have Mark answer.
Yes. So Mark, it's Kathy McKinney. I'm asking what kind of kiln, what size is your kiln, or how many kilns do you have in your studio that enable you to make such large pieces? Do you make some of them unassembled and then put them together, or how does that work, the size of your kilns, what you can produce?
That is, I built it, and it's, you know, I can't touch any walls.
Okay, it's pretty big.
It's really big. And
Yeah, I saw it before.
5 circles. So I have to make big stuff to fill it. The hard part is getting the work in the kiln when it's greenware. Because as you know, greenware is fragile. You look at it the wrong way, it wants to crack. So it took me a while to figure out how to get the work in there. But once it's misfired, then I can bang around a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do them in parts and reassemble them later. But I do also like to fill the space with tall figures. And sometimes when I do a massive piece, I fire it all together and then I have to pull it apart after it's fired, just so I can get it out of the kiln and
Okay,
be able to transport it.
it's amazing. Thanks.
Yeah, it's fun. You know, it's not making a pot anymore. I started out making pots,
Right.
or pots grew legs and arms.
How do you move them into the kiln? I mean, they're heavy. Do you have a dolly or do you have an assistant or what? How do you get those in there?
Well, when I was younger, I used to be able to just lift them up. But now I'm a little smarter and I put them on parts and boards. And then I push the board into the kiln and the board burns away and leaves the sculpture.
Okay, all right. Oh, careful. Thank you. Good, thank you.
It was just brilliant. I always thought you couldn't burn things when you're doing a misfire, and it's so much easier just to put the board and everything in there, and the piece just sits down. All you have to do is sweep up the ash when you're done. So thanks for the question. I appreciate it.
So, Mark, were you always interested in ceramic work initially?
Yes, I started out in high school. They used to leave the window open on the weekends so we can come work in the play room. And later I talked to the art teacher and they knew where we were by the footprints we left in the halls.
For sure. We have another question. Barbara Carson, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask Mark your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Okay, my question is, I know that Mark spent some time in 2019 in Ukraine, and I was wondering if that time he was there making those sculptures, if he came back and it brought back any new inspiration for him.
Well, thanks for the question. It was a great experience. I went there not really knowing what I was getting into. And the camaraderie and other artists from around the world were there. They said they had a big kiln, which they had a big kiln about my size, and it was wood fired, but they only had a small hole to put the work into the kiln. And so I'm not used to making large pieces like that. So that made me think, you know, how can I do it? And the competition, it had to be at least 24 feet tall. And so that was a lot of parts that we had to fire. And wood firing is such a labor intensive thing, and it leaves a different look. But it was a great experience. I was been invited to come back to Ukraine, but with the COVID thing, I have to wait a little bit before I do that. But it was nice to see how other artists around the world work with clay. Good question, thank you.
I imagine when you were talking about this, and you had mentioned that you had spent some time in India. I spent some time there as well, and I remember seeing people create pottery and having it dry outside in the sun, and it's a very different way of making. Do you find yourself inspired when you're traveling internationally, seeing how other artists are working in the same medium?
Yeah, yes and no. What I've been surprised is how similar everybody is around the world. We all have these thoughts. We have to eat. We all have our partners. And all the same concerns. It's just how we work with material. It might change what we have around. India was very eye-opening. The history I didn't know much about until I got there. There are wells that go down hundreds of feet that are all carved with intricate carvings. It's just beautiful. And India, I think, is a country in transition. And when everybody comes on board, they're going to be a power to deal with. Korea was another interesting place. that has a strong ceramic tradition. And it's always nice to see their history influencing the contemporary work, where in America, our history is not that old. So we're free to sort of have a smorgasbord of everything and then make it our own, which I like that part.
I agree. So I thought, and feel free if any of our guests, if you have more questions, please feel free to keep asking. I have a few for Mark myself. Oh, of course. One of our questions is, so you've been a working artist for some time, you've worked during different environments. Has working during a global pandemic affected your process as an artist? And if so, how?
Well, to be honest with you, I sort of like, being forced to stay in the studio, which is great because I do that anyways. The problem is getting the work out to the rest of the world. Shipping is so expensive. And what I usually do is just fill up the van and then go around the country dropping off work. And I couldn't do that last year. And so that changed. So I just kept making and making. And then the stuff started having to go outside because I started filling up my studio.
Thank you. So we have a couple more questions. One is, did you learn any differences in glazing and technique in your travels?
Yes. In India, they have these things, I'm sure it's in China too, where they're sort of like tambourine shapes, but they're concave. And then they bang the balls together because the clay isn't as good. And it's almost like a shale, so they have to compress the clay, and that strengthened their pieces by banging the pieces together and working up. So, yeah, and everyone does something different with molds and material. There was use of coconut fiber. We just don't have coconut fiber in Michigan a lot to add to our work. So that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I also love the food. It's like going around the world and eating my way through.
Oh, yeah. That sounds fantastic. This is less of a question, but more of a comment. Someone said, thank you so much. They've owned one of your crows for many years, and that it's a prized possession. Brings them great joy every day.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody coming in and looking at this, with their brown bag lunch. It's hard to do this kind of stuff, better in person.
Yeah.
But, well, we're doing our best.
One of the, I also prefer seeing art in person. I had a conversation with one of our guests who came to the outdoor pop-up on Saturday, and they mentioned that one of the beautiful things is, because art spaces aren't as crowded, is that there is an opportunity to kind of move through at your own pace.
Yes.
Whereas sometimes when you're, when it's a popular show, it can be so
Right.
busy and you can't really see the work in the same way.
Yeah, I never liked when somebody's next to me wanting to look at the same thing I'm looking at. It's like, give me a moment. I want to see.
I feel like that you sometimes end up with that same group that you
Yes.
move through the exhibit with.
Right. Yeah, that's not fun. But, I hope people come in and see the show. It's a lot of work. And some of them I actually think is pretty good, but that's just me.
Well, and we have your crows in the window as well. And we have a beautiful sculpture in our window. So even if you happen to be out for a walk in downtown and the gallery isn't open, we still have an installation of Mark's work in the window and a collection of crows, which are also for sale. And which actually reminded me, I wanted to ask you, Mark, I know you're kind of known for your crows, and I do see some of that imagery sort of, repeated throughout. So crows or ravens where did that inspiration come from originally?
Well, I'm out in the country, and we have a murder of crows living on our property. I also have skylights in my studio. And so they actually come in into the skylight and look and see what I'm doing. So I decided to make little ones. This is a long time ago. So I was making these crows. And then I made a 6-foot crow. And I put it in the van after it was done. And the crows were like crying. They noticed it was gone.
My gosh.
So that one, they're very smart. They have lookouts and stuff, and they watch me going back and forth, and I let everybody know. So yeah, they're my buddies.
They have, I've heard that they understand like behaviors and patterns.
Oh yeah, they follow me. They know what time it is, but I try to keep regular hours in the studio. It's like a job, but it's not a job. It isn't. So I get there in the morning. I take a lunch break. And they know.
That is so cool. Well, we still have some time for some more questions, but I did want to let everyone know that the show is up until March 27th. We still have appointments available on Tuesdays and Saturdays if you feel comfortable seeing the show in person. It is free admission. We're asking our guests to make appointments because of COVID, but seeing the work in person, it's really stunning, and I encourage you. We can drop a link into the chat so you know how to make an appointment as well. Someone said that you were also known for your fish as well.
Oh, no, that was a long time ago. Those are my toxic waste fish. And I used to have those hanging from a string locally. So I made a lot of those, and they were just funny little creatures. But they kept me going.
I love that.
So then I just couldn't make it.
Somebody else said, could you please talk about your process of building a piece? Are you realizing an inner vision? Are you improvising / dancing with the clay to see what develops?
It's more like having a vision first, because the drawing is more free form dancing, where the clay, since I have to start at the bottom, and each day I keep building and building and building. So in the back of your mind, you have to have an idea of where you're going, just to see what the other side looks like. On my figures, you start at the bottom and then you work them up. So it is more of I have to know where I'm starting. I put feet on the wrong side and really screwed up, but most of the time I know where I'm going. It's not as spontaneous as it looks.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I also wanted to mention to our guests that we have Mark's work is also available for purchase on our website as well. And we do, if you're interested, when you come, we do actually have a free take and make crow kit. That is really wonderful. So you can, if you're feeling inspired and you want to make, I made my own crow the other night. It was so fun. And if you want to dig a little deeper, on Saturday, March 20th, we are going to have a workshop. It's going to be virtual, creative animal sculptures with Susanna Van Horn. And to register for that class, it is on our website. So you can register for the class and schedule an appointment and purchase work on our website. We did put the link for scheduling appointments in the chat. And I do encourage folks to come and see it in person. It's really, really special and just beautiful to be able to come in and sort of, meditate in this space and see the work and take it in at your own pace. We have a few more minutes if anybody had any more questions, or Mark, if you had any sort of. Sure. Well, we'll take everyone to tour so we can see more of the show. What do you want to see first?
Yeah, so I don't know if you can get in to see like the drawings. These are those little thought balloons, right? Vessels. You can even see the wind blowing in their hair.
I hadn't noticed that. I'm so glad you pointed that out.
Well, this is the one time that I can actually go into doing something small.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'm wrestling with the clay. I like the physical part of the clay. But these, I can get more personal with it. See what's there.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the ants, whoever thought of welding ant legs onto a body?
That's interesting. So when did you start? Did you learn to weld as a necessity?
Yes, because I couldn't afford to make, to have bases made for me.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to weld. And, I'm not a pretty welder. Let's put it that way, but it sticks.
Yeah.
So, I can get it, so I'm not in trouble.
Yes.
So, you have to be sort of a jack of all trades, know how to weld and cut steel, work with clay, a lot of different materials, glues and resins.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, with the chemistry and the glazes. Because you get a bag like 100 pounds of bone ash, like, where did that come from? It's like, so it makes a nice glaze though. So
Yeah.
try not to think about it too much. But
When you were talking about the physicality of making, I love installing and shows. For those who don't know me, I install the exhibits here, and I really like the physicality of it. It to me sort of harkens back to the making.
yeah.
And even playing with the clay the other night, like that tactile piece of making, I think is just sort of comforting and feels really intuitive.
Yeah, there's something about clay. So it's the only self-adhesive material I know. Put it together, take it apart, put it together. But it has some rules, so you got to learn what the rules are so you know how to break them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different stages, but still, you can just stick it together. And it's like great. Wood, you can't do that. You have to do all this stuff to make it fit. And concrete's a whole nother beast.
One of our guests wanted to see the dogs and the cat, so we're gonna try to head over there so we can get a closer look.
Well, this one is a good girl. And then
And that one has both the animal and sort of human figurative elements to it.
sort of like, going back to Egyptian deities, but not quite. They always combined. And then the Native Americans, they had spirit guides. So that's.
Mark, could you stand over here by the dog so we get a sense of scale?
So these things are, you have to wrestle them around. They have a presence to them. And this blue glaze I've been working on, it's several layers of different glazes. It's just sort of fun. It's sort of like blue lichen.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not really user-friendly. They have rough edges.
Someone said that they loved the puppies.
Oh, thank you.
They are just so charming and they have so much personality.
Yeah, they got the whole family there.
Yeah, we just have a little technical cordage.
And you
To
can see the
arrange.
cats are just behind the dogs.
No, as you can tell, they're not anatomically correct, but yet they have a cat.
Mhm.
And it's the thing with the dog, there's a dog nest.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do exact breeds.
And
Yeah.
the sheep as well, if we can,
Behind us?
yeah, capture those.
I don't mind our cords here, everyone.
And I don't know if you can sort of see in the video, they're so just wonderful. Their personalities like are just really, really shine.
And that's a different glaze I've been working with. So I'm expanding my vocabulary. And, you know, you gotta keep it going and trying new stuff. And that's what's fun for me, is to make something I've never made before.
Do you ever try a new glaze or, you know, a new technique and then just have it totally fail?
It does, yes. My driveway is paved with all those kind of experiments. But I'm getting better. You know, I pretty much know what's gonna work and what's not.
Yeah.
So again, thank you.
Oh, one last person. They would like to see the figures behind you. We're gonna.
Oh, so these are studies.
Like a maquette?
Yeah, like a maquette, yes. And these are fast. These are more spontaneous. See what's there, pull it out. Not like the big ones. And this is just working out ideas to see if I can do something, if a glaze is going to work. They start out with a lot of detail, and then the layers of glaze covers it up. But I like that you can look at it and all of a sudden start seeing things.
And this one in the back, right here, has this head. And when you see it from the top, it reminds me of something you might see at like Easter Island.
But also, there's a couple holding each other in an embrace.
Oh.
There's their two heads, the arms and legs. You know, so it's like two halves of one.
That's beautiful. It's truly a phenomenal show and really exciting to have a new body of work here. So even, you know, even folks who are used to, you know, familiar with your work, Mark, you know, they could still come and see new work that is being, you know, premiered here, which is really exciting.
Well, again, thank you for letting me show my work.
Oh, it is absolutely our pleasure. It truly has been. And thank you everyone who has joined us today. It is, thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time to be here. And I really encourage everyone to, if you're available, to come. If you are not available to see the work, we are actually going to have a professional tour, a digital tour of the space taken. So for any reason, if you live outside of the area or you're not able to make it, we will still have another opportunity for people to take a tour from their homes. And we will share that once that is ready. And you know, many people saying just the work is beautiful, and thanking you, Mark.
I hope everybody stays safe, and I'd like to see everybody in person soon.
Yes.
Get close to everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Lots of waiting.